Good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter, and this is an episode dedicating to the spirit of the times and spirit of the world. So this is Jupiter Venus hour, two benefics. The ascendant is in 29 degrees Scorpio, tropically, okay? So this is not the sting of the Scorpio, it is tropical Scorpio, which would be sidereal, probably either the beginning of Scorpio or Libra. Um, Mercury on 25 degrees is the ruler of the descendant, Jupiter in 5 degrees Taurus, so it just ingress into 5 degrees Taurus, 0, so on the minute. Applying to, no, Mars is separating from this, and Jupiter is separating from Pluto. Square, so the disentanglement of the T. So today is Jupiter. Jupiter is in Taurus, doing things, and the ruler of the hour is Venus, which is the ruler of Jupiter and the ruler of the descendant. So it's the ruler of both the ascendant and descendant of this time. Again, an erratic degree, and Venus is in Leo, 2 degrees Leo. She's just separating from the opposition to Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto is just 2 minutes away from ingressing back into Capricorn before it will make its passage the for good. I keep saying that, but it's the S.J. Anderson coined the for good, or at least that's the person I've heard saying that. The moon is in 18 degrees, which is considered by degree theories of the deceased Nicolas Stoyanovich a malefic degree. And is Saturn ruled with Saturn in Pisces. Okay, and so the ruler of the descendant is also the ruler of the midheaven, that is Mercury, which is conjuncting Algol. World events. That is the setting for the topic chosen, which is delving into the synastry of tyrants from the Second World War, which was Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler. So I'm going to look separately at their charts, and I'm going to comprise the synastry by heart, so that you get to look at the two separate charts and a bit of why Stalin and Hitler was during the Second World War. Stalin and Hitler basically had a treaty, okay, and Hitler violated that treaty. So basically Hitler betrayed Stalin. And I'm going to look at the charts and see what did these two tyrants that were a tremendous part of the break-in of the Second World War brought into each other's chart. Okay, how did they relate? And so I find it quite fascinating that I have the assistance of two benefics. Okay, one is separating from opposition to Pluto, the other one is separating from a square to Pluto. And so it's a Mars ruled ascendant. For this episode, Mars is in Leo in the 10th house, so is Venus. And yeah, kind of disentangling itself from the T-square and applying to, slowly applying to conjunct Lilith and then to trine Chiron. So the ruler of the 9th house is the moon in Saturn's sign. The moon is in the 4th house, whole sign speaking, for the setting of this episode. And I've opened with a disclaimer of honoring the spirit of the times and the spirit of the world. So this is a greater look at the times, basically, with and you see that the two benefics. So the ascendant is ruled by Mars, which is considered a malefic or several times, but Mars is also probing into and analyzing and delving into something, and Jupiter and Venus are kind of the influence. Without further ado, Let's go to Hitler's chart. So this is the first chart that you get to know. And I'm doing custom graphics. So Hitler had ascendant separating from Spica, or perhaps right on Spica at this time. 26 degrees ascendant in Libra. So Hitler's ascendant is Venus ruled. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Stalin's ascendant is, I think, Jupiter ruled. We'll see about that. Yeah, yes, it is. Okay, so we have the ruler of the day is Jupiter, which is the ruler of Stalin ascendant, and the ruler of the hour is Venus, which is Hitler's ascendant. The Venus for Hitler is in Taurus conjuncting Mars. Venus is retrograde for Hitler, and Venus and Mars are squaring his Saturn, which is in Leo. Hitler had, according to this, Hitler had a 0-degree Taurus sun. Okay, so the sun of Hitler was not in Aries according to this, but in Taurus. Note he was born in 20 April according to this. So that would give him Venus as the ruler of both the ascendant and the sun. Moon in Capricorn, but applying to conjunct Jupiter. And so I want to look first of all at the seventh house. So the seventh house for Hitler is ruled by Mars, and he has a 25 degrees Mercury. Okay, there. And at his time, Aries was way sooner. I will touch on the asteroids later. So his Mars is in the 8th house, conjuncting Venus, is the ruler of the ascendant. So ruler of the ascendant in the 8th. I want to, no, before I take a look at the Sedna, I want to just take a look at his chart. His Pluto is on 4 degrees Gemini, Neptune 0 degrees Gemini. So Pluto and Neptune are kind of conjuncting, still within orb at the time of his birth. And I just gave, like my bone literally flew this glass of water and spilled the water. Just interesting. Okay. Anyway. So yeah, this Mercury conjuncting the descendant. In first house, he has Uranus at 19 degrees. 19 degrees to the ascendant, that is 26 degrees. If that is the ascendant, indeed, it's quite a big orb to say Uranus is conjuncting the ascendant. However, we shall not forget that this is, first of all, it's a Venus-Uranus. Okay, now we have Uranus on the other Venus sign, which is Taurus, and it's in the first house. And so for Uranus in the first house in general, it can mean that the body's nervous system, the physical nervous system for the person, is having revolutions, downloads, overwhelm, and this is a person who has an outer planet in his first house. So this person plays a part in events that are of the spirit of the times by just being. It can be, for some people, it can even be the body. Okay, some unusualness about the body. The only thing I can think about with Hitler, because he would be representing supposedly of Irish people, and his eyes and hair were black, okay, or dark brown. So he didn't look Irish, so he looked unusual relative to the people that he represented. I had visions of Hitler, which is funny, because the way I would have them is it's not like he's in front of me, but like I would begin to have like I have this hair and this, and so it's kind of like, okay, it's very weird. So this is humorous. So Rao and Keto. So for Hitler, do I need to do this again? Because I think Keto is in Capricorn, which for him it would be 4th house. Okay, and he was born in what we now know as Österreich. Okay, so Austria, and that would mean his Rahu is in the 10th house. But the 10th house is ruled by Cancer, which is in the 4th house. So then we have this ruler of Rahu is with Ketu. Okay? And so Eventually, one of the things, like Hitler was aspiring to a revival of a motherland. So you could see it as a peculiar continuation of the unification of Germany. Um, and you think about the unification, which was a theme, the unification into the great motherland. Then, of course, you think about Italy, but this episode is Stalin and Hitler. Although I do already have Mussolini's chart. So, those also themes are that aspire to a motherland. Now, the moon is fallen. Okay, the moon is in Capricorn, the moon is in the sign of contraction. And so the sense of emotional safety is basically very challenged. Okay, which everybody that has a moon in Capricorn knows that you don't have to be Hitler. But the moon is conjuncting Jupiter. That is also in the 4th house. Okay. And this conjunction is actually sextile in the sun. So there is a sextile. The moon is separating from a sextile to the sun. And that, the sextile of the sun and the moon, the sun is right above the horizon. So it's difficult to say if it functions as a day sect or a night sect. And so even though I wanted to refer to sect, it's very difficult for me to do so because, again, because the sun is so close to the horizon, it can function, it can absolutely function as a night chart still, and then I would build a building in the air. So, sun sextile moon, and the sun is in Taurus. It does tell us of a person that, let's say, if you would say what kind of caregiving was this person born into, it does not denote in itself any particular collision between the parental figures. Okay, immediately what sparks to my mind, that's probably going to be quite an episode, is Siegel about the developing brain and teenagers. So Dan Siegel looked into also I wanted to say the charts of, but he was a psychiatrist and a neurologist and psychologist, and he was looking into, for example, the cases of children who are mass shooters, and immediately the society asked, how did the parents raise their child? And he saw that, well, the parents do have a tremendous effect on the child up until, his upbringing, up until his teenagehood. During teenagehood, our brains are literally wired to take risks and take a leap into space. And at this time of teenagehood, which astrologically you could probably associate with both Saturn square and Uranus square, so kind of like the teens to the 20s. And 20s is also teenagehood. And there people begin to be more affected by the environment around them and by the society around them. So if you ask, is Hitler a nature nurturer? Now I would say neither. It is the face of the times. As from this is a clue that it wasn't that Hitler's parents were terrible in his upbringing or terrible to him. Of course, I would need to look at the rulers. Yeah, but a bit wait with that. But essentially, between the sun and the moon, even though the moon is fallen, the sun and the moon see each other. Okay, it's not that there was disconnect. That this person did not grow into a certain disconnect, or even if there was disconnect, there was something that brought these two people together. Okay, of course, as a person who also has sextile between sun and moon, I must tell you, you have to look at more things as we immediately look. Where is the ruler of the moon? It is Saturn. Where is the ruler of the sun? It is Venus. And so, if you want to know, first, side note, if you want to know more about looking at the sun and looking at the moon from someone who developed this view as a Sol Pluto generation astrologer, is Yair Trubelsky, and I really hope to bring him to translate his stuff because he wrote in very poetic and very his own, like his Mercury Aries. When I say poetic, I don't mean rather like elegance so much as brute truth presented with humor and wit. And because some of the analogies and word plays do not always easily translate, then it's difficult to bring these teachings into English. But I do want to honor the person that kind of got me to pay attention to this. Another astrologer that talks in English about this is the channel of Truth in Aspect Astrology and the notion of sun and moon and the essential happiness in a person's life. Back to us. And so the ruler of the sun and the ruler of the moon, which is Venus and Saturn, are indeed in square relations. Okay? And so, while the sun and the moon are kind of okay with each other, their rulers are not okay. And that tells us that there was an underlying tension that Hitler was born into. That even though the luminaries are, seeing each other, there is contraction around the emotional aspect, as well as perhaps criticism. Okay, the sun is in the Saturn is in the sign of the sun, is in Leo, 13 degrees. Venus is retrograde, and that kind of, and it is the ruler of the sun. So this is another thing that we want to look into, because Saturn usually refers to the father, and here is the ruler of the moon. Okay, and the sun is usually referring to the father and is in the sign of Venus. So we already get at an even deeper tension and contradiction relative to the times where there was a harmony between tensions and a tension between harmony. So that's something to look at. His Chiron was in Cancer, which is again not surprising. If Chiron is the wounded healer, you think about Hitler as the person who tried to look for a motherland, to create a motherland, to aspire to the motherland, which he saw in the past, to revive the motherland of the great land of Germany. And it fell into quite a fiasco from the way we see it in our times. Okay? And it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a German. All people see it as a sort of a fiasco, unless there are, some, traces of racism and so on and so forth. So that's for Hitler. Okay? We can see that there are not a lot of aspects in these charts to begin with, but the moon is opposing Chiron, which is not shown here, and Chiron is also opposing Jupiter. Okay. This is so much as this chart goes. There is an inconjunction between Pluto and the moon, and to a lesser degree Pluto and Jupiter, which we need to take into account. Sun in 0 degrees, so we have the 0 degrees Sun and the 0 degrees Neptune, which are in 30 degrees aspect from each other. 0 degrees meaning if you enter a sign, okay, 0 degrees, it means you just open the door. So you open the door and there is Taurus. Well, for Neptune, you open the door and there is Gemini. So I don't know if Neptune was in the for good ingress into Gemini, but he definitely just opened the door, and so, well, there's Gemini. Now, Neptune is both the sign of great spirituality, non-dualism, and illusion and disillusionment, and therefore can be ideation and devaluation. And Gemini is basically society, it is children, it is trade or economy, it is communication. So this is one chart, and now we're going to go into the chart of the opponent, okay, the representative of Russia, okay, or Soviet Union, which is Joseph Stalin. And so he was born in Gori, and Hitler was born in Brunau, which is, by the way, such a beautiful. I haven't been to Russia, but I had the honor to be in Brunau. It is Brunau am See. It's such a beautiful place. So, yeah, um, wonderful location, but then doesn't tell you everything about the fate of its people. So, it's surprisingly enough, Stalin died at 74 years old, so he didn't die all that young, huh? I don't remember, like, let's just check a bit of comparison. How old was Hitler when he died? He was 56. Okay, again, not all that young, but not at old age, so 56. He did not make it to his second Saturn return, Stalin did. And so he was born in 1889, died in 45, and no, this Mussolini. Uh, and um, and so Stalin was born 1878. Oh my gosh, there's a bit of rain. Anyway, Stalin was born in 78. Look at the lovely, not dissociation, but kind of, you really need when you're talking about these topics, this kind of tender, just like really tender rain right now. Just so tender that I actually stay seated and it's kind of refreshing. Um, so it's like almost the weather is kind of like considering the topic that needs to be talked about, but in tenderness. So for Stalin, let's go into custom graphic. The ascendant was in. Don't laugh. I know I shared the ascendant and the midheaven with Stalin. I laugh at it enough. This is a serious episode. So, and I shared the Mercury, by the way, with Hitler. So yeah. So um, his ascendant in 24 degrees Pisces, if this is a true chart, and Saturn conjuncting the ascendant. Okay, the midheaven 27 degrees, and 27 degrees is 1 degree away from what we call the sting of the Scorpio, or the galactic center in a more modern way. And this is a point where a person, just this aspect, okay? I'm not saying the tendency, because that would give too much agency or too less agency, and I'm being very cautious of that. It can give a person a place where they need to choose the light, okay? Because they can choose what they can do with that, with displacement. And so for the midheaven, it can be a person that would end up being remembered as the Stalin, or it can also be a person that would manage to choose the light, and indeed that would be his legacy. So for Stalin, he had Sun in Sagittarius, which is the closest to the midheaven, and he was not like the name Sun. I know the Son of Peoples. Now I'm getting confused between sign. Oh, China was the land of the rising sun, and so the sign of the peoples. I think it was associated to Stalin, but I'm not certain. And so he was known as being the sign of the peoples, if that is the case. And the next closest to the midheaven is Venus. There is always a square relation between our 10th house and our first house, but here it is also by the degree of the ascendant and the midheaven. Who he was in person, Stalin, versus what he was known for is very much intention. Okay? To a certain degree, it is always the case. You know, when we see people in public, we don't see them in private life. This is for you know, the first axis versus the first seventh axis versus the 10th fourth axis. So there's polarity there, but or tension between polarities is more to say. But in here, notice the personal planets that are so close to the midheaven. That is Venus in the anaretic degree in Sagittarius. Um, so Venus is ruling both his third house and his eighth house. Me trying to see what houses when I have Pisces ascendant was really humorous right now. And she is, in his case, it's in his 10th with the sun. And so, first of all, the conjunction of Venus and the sun makes for a very interesting dichotomy, because on the one hand, Venus with the sun and with the midheaven, this is a person who is publicly attractive. Venus is attracting, okay, drawing in. So this is a person who is solar but drawing people in. That being said, when Venus is close to the sun dries Venus up. And so you become actually less Venusian. So there's a certain intricacy, okay, to the allure of a Venus conjunct Sun persona. But in his case, is his public persona. Saturn conjuncting his ascendant. So Saturn gives us restriction. It also gives us a life path that is, you could say, laden with difficulty and misfortune, but it's also given a person a certain resilience. If you think Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter, the ruler of the ascendant, is in the 12th house here with, I think this is Rahu. I need to do this Rahu Ketu because this is quite important. This is quite important, okay? So Rahu Ketu. Rahu Ketu pictures, images, and that's lovely. And so we need the symbolism. We just had the ecliptic thingy. So yes, this is Rahu. Good, I remembered. So Jupiter is in the 12th house with Rahu. 12th house, so isolation, exile, hospitals, imprisonment, and all of the above. Ruler of the ascendant in the 12th, and the ruler being Jupiter, it means that the life path of this person involves tremendous isolation. Now, if you think about the kings or queens, they can have 12th house placements. If you think about pop stars, so if you take the ascendant Scorpio for Beyonce, which is not impossible, that would mean Beyonce has 12th house stellium with her sun in the 12th. And so while she's a very public person, her private life are sometimes incredibly private, and she lives in tremendous seclusion from the people who worship her. Okay? Kind of like a goddess ideation thingy. And so for a grand leader, they have the security around them. They have even another person that has a 12th house stellium in Scorpio is Biden. Okay, so you can see how this placement of the ruler of the ascendant in the 12th doesn't necessarily give you a person who is unseen or unheard of or not public, but a person whose life path involves seclusion. And Jupiter with Rahu, it means that there is also aspiration to that. All of that happening in a Saturn-ruled sign. So there's this reception between the 12th and the 1st. And this reception is both of loss and energy draining, but also revitalizing and finding joy in seclusion, finding joy in losses and the struggles of life. Jupiter is joy. Okay, sometimes a lot of the traumatic things that people experience around traumatic events is the vitality that there was in those moments. So whether it's captivity or violation of boundaries or whatnot, and sometimes the very joy that they felt in the traumatic situation is a part of the trauma. Like, hey, this was traumatic to me, and that difficulty can really cause havoc in the psyche. So bring Rahu into this mix. This gives us tremendous hunger for these experiences. So while Rahu can take away a lot of the what people call bad karma because you're eager to the experience, it can also instigate the trauma of being eager to have a traumatic experience. Okay? And that would mean Ketu with the 6th house, so the physical health, and indeed Stalin was eventually in a situation where he could not trust doctors. He could not trust people to treat him well. Um, so that was a part of his journey. Had Lilith in the 18th house, in the 18th degree of Aries, the second house. So again, 18th degree, another degree of not good conduct, according to Nikola Stoyanovich degree theory. So he could either have been attracted to these types of Liliths that can be malefic or destructive, or he could exert these qualities himself in relation to women, I don't know, or in relation to war. Okay. Moon in Libra. So if you notice, the moon is in 12 degrees Libra, and Uranus of Hitler is in 19 degrees Libra. So this is already one thing that I pay attention to. Uranus for him is in 4 degrees Virgo in the 7th house. So Uranus can both mean where you rebel, but in the 7th house it means that your significant other, a partner, or anybody you share, you have joined, let's say if you signed a political agreement with the leader of another country, they're your 7th. And they can bring rebellion. And so while Uranus in itself, and Uranus is well aspected here, is Venus applies to trine it is trine in, still, yeah, it is applying to trine Neptune here. It is exactly trine in Chiron. Okay, so yes, Chiron is with Neptune, which is interesting, and Chiron in 4 degrees Taurus. I'll touch on that Pluto in a second. And so Venus in the 7th usually brings divorces. Venus in the 2nd, yes, scrap the whole thing. Uranus in the 7th can bring upon divorces. It can also bring actually very long relations that are just unusual. But in essence, Uranus in the 7th does not denote of betrayal. On a political level, it can mean that your partner brings rebelliousness to the relation. That can also mean that you are two rebels, or it can also mean that your partner rebels you. And so we look at the ruler of Uranus, which is Mercury, is in the lot of fortune, the 11th degree of Capricorn. Is in with the lot of fortune. So this means that Stalin would have fated events, okay, that would denote a significant other affecting his fate or his fortune. Not fate, I mean not as, fate and fortune. I mean the places where it is fatalistic or it is deterministic for him to have a peak event. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. And something to do with the significant other bringing upon an event to do with his basically colleagues, which is the 11th house. Okay, and his colleagues were tyrants, and that affecting him in a way that is fatalistic. Okay, but also in a way that is deterministic. That can mean that you can have an unusual fated relationship, and in his case, the betrayal could be seen as rebellion. Okay, so it's not necessarily betrayal in itself. So this is important. So Uranus is not betrayal; it's rebellion, and rebellion at its nature can be perceived as a betrayal. Although, when you talk about the international sphere, rebellions are acts of something that is not necessarily betrayal, but here, of course, there is betrayal too. Okay. Mars is in 25 degrees Scorpio, trine in the ascendant, trine in Saturn. So there is a trine between Saturn. It basically means with the Sun is clearly on the midheaven. This is clearly a date chart. And that means that the malefic insect and the malefic out of sect are having a trine relations within them. Okay, so Good or bad, I don't know, but it is something that perhaps it can mean the good is mixed with the bad and the bad is mixed with the good, but that can play out in many ways. Um, for him, Saturn ruled his 11th and 12th houses, and and that can bring also the theme of hidden enemies and betrayals to the ascendant. Saturn was not the malefic out of sect, okay? So Saturn was not the energy that Stalin found too difficult to deal with. For example, when Hitler rebelled Stalin, it doesn't necessarily, although it came from the 12th, which is what you didn't know that you didn't know, um, which is a surprise, but it also came from a planet that is not the most difficult planet for Stalin to deal with. Okay, so it's like you didn't know that you didn't know that, but it's not going to affect you as dramatically as if the 12th was actually ruled by Mars. So, um, and Jupiter has, Jupiter, and I'm not going to use the word joy because it's a complete, like it's a Hellenistic concept of the joy of planets. So it's not Jupiter has its joy there, but it's Jupiter is a point of expansion. So that can expand on the event of enemies, by the way, it can. But it can also mean that Stalin could be or could find optimism in seeing the unseen. Okay? It can also, in a way, mean that even though he didn't know that he didn't know that, it's not that hidden from his eye because there is eagerness towards there. So that can play out in many ways. So, Pluto. So Pluto for Stalin conjuncts. What did Hitler have on Algol? No, it was not. Yeah. So Pluto for Stalin is in 24 degrees. It's a retrograde Pluto. 24 degrees Taurus. Taurus is the sign of land. Note that Hitler's Pluto is already in Gemini. Okay, so Gemini is about society, civil society, societal warfare, or civil war sometimes, the power of society. Um, but Taurus is also value, possessions, land. Okay, or for Hitler it's more trade, and Pluto with Algol mundanely is can be a radical power and disempowerment experiences, and an unusual way of finding your power by the merit of Pluto being retrograde. It can give Algol-like experiences to the native, both as the victim of such experiences, and I don't know a lot about the upbringing of Stalin. The moon and the sun for Stalin do not see each other, okay? That tells me that what we call, like the upbringing. And by the way, neither do their rulers, so neither does Venus and Jupiter. So unlike Hitler, where there was harmony and tension in the upbringing, for Stalin, there was something that was cut off. So this can be like perhaps arranged marriage, or marriage that was not necessarily willingly consensual, or marriage that worked on a different level than the level of essential happiness. Okay, maybe they were married for various reasons other than being the sun and moon, but it also kind of means that the two caregivers that were bringing Stalin to life were not really either seeing each other, or maybe it was, even single mother, single father, though it doesn't necessarily mean this is the case. And the solar and the lunar aspects are not easily met, because what seems to he would seem to have no connection between the lunar aspects he bears, which is Luna in the eighth house, even though Venus is conjuncting the Sun. So it's no direct connection. There can be access to it by the merit of the ruler of the Moon conjuncting the Sun, but it kind of like does not easily blend. Okay, the way into combining your solar inspiration and your lunar, so the place where you feel safe at and the place where you're confident being yourself at, seem like a contradiction or like something that doesn't, like two parts that don't make a whole, even though it's not necessarily the case. Okay, well, being born with the sun and moon in harmonious aspect, it seems like the confidence or lack of confidence that you have makes sense in light of the sense of safety or lack of sense of safety you feel in the world. So that's Pluto on the algol, and Pluto is opposing Mars, which gives us a tremendous theme of aggression. Okay, it's a very strong Mars. It's Mars in Scorpio in the Jupiter phase of Scorpio. So this is not a Mars that, it is a Mars that is actually competent of doing great good. I don't remember the name of the nakshatra, but this is also where the fate of the person leads them to wanting to do the right thing with their actions. Well, Pluto, I think it is on Kritika nakshatra, on Algol. So there can even be a desire to do the right thing, Mars, that is confronted with the spirit of the times that calls for other actions. Okay? Again, it is all relative to the spirit of the times. You know, it kind of makes you scratch your head in modern times. But this Mars is clearly not seeking evil. Mars, the drive, okay, or the actions are clearly not seeking evil. And you can denote that Stalin had a peace agreement with Hitler, which is an act that basically calls for a certain type of establishing sense of safety, or establishing clarity, or establishing something that can give peace to the land or empire or whatever you want to call it that he reigns, from his point of view. And he was seen literally, you know, as the son of the peoples. He was this great, perhaps, father or luminary that is bringing a lot of good. Okay, by the way, I was supporting Israel, and one of the historical documents that I saw is basically when a person dies, you have these ads in the newspaper about mourning their death. So we had ad in the newspaper mourning the death of Stalin when he died. Okay, in Israel. Okay, so we were born in the, like when we were born, we had more the support of Russia, then later we switched more to the support of the United States, with periods of in between that was begging, where Israel kind of had to stand alone, and she stood quite proudly to the surprise of the entire world, which would later coincide with actually the lack of support, and kind of people stopping to ideate, but also unable to devaluate this country. So steering a lot of mixed emotions. But at the times where Stalin died, he was being mourned, okay? And it was difficult for people to see the atrocities that were performed in the name of his reign. So, very interesting opposition between a Mars that is a direct Mars, that is in the Jupiter phase of Scorpio. Is the Mars more optimistic? It's also Mars is optimistic about his way to achieve something, opposing this tremendous force of gravity or gravitating towards deep atrocities. Okay, the experience of both experiencing deep atrocities and performing tremendous atrocities against humanity, also regarding land. Okay. Neptune, 7 degrees Taurus. So again, ideation and devaluation around the theme of land, of resources, to some degree of women, but yeah, I don't know. It's like I don't think it was anything unusual relative to the spirit of the times or to the spirit of any time. So yeah. Neptune is squaring the nodes. Separation, and this is a retrograde Neptune, so it applies to square the nodes again. This means that the theme of Neptune is important. Indeed, he was serving time being the ruler of a political entity that is very associated with the Neptune Saturn, okay, cycle. And in his ascendant, there is also this Neptune Saturn. And if you take Neptune as associated with Pisces, which I do, if you want to know more about the Russia or USSR and the Neptune-Saturn cycle, I encourage you to watch Dan Waite's video and S.J. Anderson. I think they did a collab on this particular one of mundane astrology. It's a fascinating episode. So, Chiron here is also squaring the nodes and squaring Jupiter. So we have a Jupiter-Neptune square here, which is exact. That can create tension between the life philosophy of a person and certain fortunes and misfortunes. Okay, Neptune is not just loss and misfortune. Neptune is also ideation to a degree of a myth, which was indeed the case for Stalin. And Neptune here is in trine relations with Mercury retrograde as well as lot of fortune. So the mythical persona that Stalin was in his public life is fated. This is also something that Neptune gives you. It elevates a person to the degree of a mythical character. Okay, so people ideate and could devaluate, and here it happened to him both in his private life, okay, both his close friends. With Chiron in Taurus, this can denote themes of betrayal because Taurus is ruled by Venus's connection. If Chiron is a wound around connection, of course we are going to see that the probability of betrayal is already coming up even before we looked at asteroids. So now, before I even look at Aries and Sadhana and whatnot, I want to begin to integrate these two charts. Let's take it from Stalin's perspective. So Stalin have ascendant in Pisces and Saturn in Pisces. And for Virgo, he has Uranus as well aspected, and of course the descendant. Now, back to Hitler. And for Hitler, Pisces is actually the 5th house. So Stalin brings ascendant and Saturn to the 5th house of Hitler. So ascendant in the 5th house, whether that can be a person who's actually your child, it can also be a person you have a creative project with, a person you are a friend with gambling, you meet in your leisure time, that brings actually joy and pleasure is the theme of the 5th house. And also gambling and risk. But Saturn there is a limiting force. This means immediately that when these two forces come to play, Hitler might desire to rebel or remove this Saturn from his Pisces. Remove this Saturn from this restriction from the 5th house. 5th house is supposed to be play, it's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be joy. Saturn brings restrictions, seriousness, duty, commitment, dedication. And of course, if you don't have it, readily available, although the ruler of the 5th for Hitler is in Capricorn. So Jupiter is in Capricorn, that means Jupiter is Saturn related. And so around the fifth house, and also around the third house, which is the other Jupiter sign, is Sagittarius, there's always going to be this commitment, this duty, this dedication that Hitler would need to come to terms with and accept and find joy in, and find a way to find joy in within the limitations around his creative projects. This can actually be a person who is materializing his creativity, which we all know Hitler did, right? His occultism and so on and so forth. But it can also be restrictive. Think about an artist that is actually making money from his art, then he needs to dedicate time to it, he needs to allocate. Now it's become a structure in his life. But the presence of somebody bringing a Saturn into your life, you might want to rebel it, you might want to remove it from your life. Like, hey, don't place upon me this responsibility. Don't place upon me this seriousness, this duty. It's like, it's supposed to be fun. So this is already intricate relations. And Uranus is brought, okay, Stalin's Uranus, which is in Virgo, in fourth degree Virgo, is bringing a rebelliousness or unexpected or chaotic nature into the 12th house of Hitler. This can mean that this person, that Hitler may have unconscious desire to rebel, or that Stalin has been rebellious towards Hitler, but in a way that is unconscious. Okay, this can actually mean Stalin was hidden enemy to Hitler. And the way Hitler was behaving was actually to remove this Uranus from his 12th house. Hey, there's something in my 12th. Let's take it out of there. Hey, there's something coming to me from the point of view of where I didn't know that I didn't know. Let's remove that. Hey, there's something in the blind spot. Okay, just wipe it off the window. And so that can be the motive for Hitler that has both Saturn in the 5th and Uranus in the 12th to want to clear this axis, which for Hitler, the axis itself is clean. Okay, there's nothing in the 12th, and there's nothing in the, it's nothing in the, yeah, oh, so this is the 6th, I'm sorry, not the 5th. Yes, it's true. Okay, so I gave the Saturn. I need to go over this Saturn. I wonder why though. Okay. Saturn in the 6th house of Hitler. Okay, so Saturn in the 6th house, it gives you, it subordinates you. Because 6 is subordinate, so Stalin basically tries to subordinate Hitler, which of course he would want to rebel, and then it brings Uranus into the 12th, so you know, it's like the Hitler has a clear 6th house, yeah? The ruler is fallen, but the house itself, it's clear. So why would he want Saturn there, right? And for the 12th, he also has a clear 12th. And his Mercury is with the descendant in 25 degrees Aries, in between the sun and trining the moon. So his Mercury, other than being with the descendant, it can mean that there's fated relations with a significant other, this opponent, partner, or whatnot, that affect his mental well-being, which can affect, by the way, also for good, not necessarily for bad. But the location of Mars being in the 8th house in Taurus, which is not in his favorite place, conjuncting this retrograde Venus, squaring Saturn, kind of means that here there's a certain obligation in which Hitler, for the sake of his mental and physical well-being, has to let go. This means that Hitler did not betray Stalin because he was malicious, but because he wanted to be physically and mentally healthy. It was an unhealthy relationship that he severed ties with, simply put. Okay? So, but this is something that is also understood. Like, if we take Stalin as a study case, it's not just a significant other, it's not just another, partner, but it's also significant others in Hitler's life. It can mean that whoever will bring anything to the 6th and the 12th, Hitler will desire to rebel that. However, his 6th ruler is fallen and his 12th ruler is with the significant other, which is ruled by a planet that is in his 8th house. Okay? And this planet squares Saturn. This basically means that unless he finds a way to remedy it, even marriage can feel very restrictive. Okay? And can bring upon an effect that is deteriorating to his mental and physical health. So the physical health with Jupiter in Capricorn is not the best to begin with, and whatever he would do, and we know that Hitler was a vegetarian or vegan or something like that, so whatever he would do to try to tame that or have, compassionate towards pets, this literally Pisces in the 6th house, compassionate towards pets, you just say, but not necessarily towards people. And in order to maintain his sanity, he would need to sever ties with anybody that is significant other, unless he found a way to remedy this magically, which he was interested in the occult, but that is a genuine difficulty. Okay, anything 7th house, anyone who is the Gegenüber, anyone that he even projects to as the 7th house, because to think about somebody as the 7th house, somebody who opposes even an idea, okay, then he would have to rebel it. And his way of dealing this Mercury is opposing the Saturn in his 1st. This means that he is the instigator of the divorce, the separation, the act of rebellion, or in this case, the betrayal. So from Hitler's perspective, he had to betray Stalin. Stalin brings Uranus into his 12th house. If he would not betray Stalin, Stalin would rebel or betray him or bring imprisonment upon Hitler by his actions, intentionally or not. Okay? And so that is how immediately when we look at this axis we can project. Now let's look at Libra and Aries axis. So for the Hitler's perspective, his ascendant around Spica, Uranus in 19 degrees of Libra, which is Venus ruled, with Venus in the 8th in Taurus, in Mars. So the ruler of his 1st and his 7th are conjuncting, but the ruler of his 1st is retrograde. This means that he does himself his own way. And he would have to try and renovate himself many times around his life. It also means that who he is will receive a grander recognition or a grander maturity as he ages. And we all know how that played out in the world. In his 7th, he has 25 degrees Mercury and the descendant, so conjuncting the descendant. Mercury is also how we think, and so Hitler is very much affected in his thinking or from significant others, enemies and partners alike. It also means that he could identify himself with the idea of the partner, or that he could identify himself with the partner. This is by the merit of Aries in the 7th. Aries can be the sense of self, and so if it is in the 7th house, you need partnership to be you, okay, to sense you. But he also has Uranus in the 1st, so that would mean he would, like, almost non-volitionally assert himself in his partnerships too. This can also denote these opposing relations or quasi-opposing relations between the descendant and Mercury and Uranus. Okay, it's a wide orb, it's not a 3-degree orb. That can definitely denote Hitler being the instigator of divorce, a separation that is sudden, and that he feels the need to rebel his partners. Okay. And here it is to rebel his partners, not necessarily to rule. It's not a Pluto, it's not to rule over his partners, in as much as it is the need to rebel them. He's almost force, almost viscerally, his body does not comply with his partner. Because this is actually like this could be this could easily be the chart of a feminist. So I'm just thinking about how feminists were considered like Hitler, but it is. Yeah, if you also think about his book being named Mein Kampf, so a Venus ruled ascendant with Mars in Venus sign, but what is my struggle? Okay, my war. Basically, Mein Kampf is my struggle, but it's also my war. And he basically identified himself, Venus's possessions, so in Taurus, so the word my is very Taurus. And my struggle. But whose struggle is it? Where's Mercury? It's in Aries. So it could be the struggle of the partner. Now, when you think about this, it can be an issue of projection. You identify as yours a struggle that is not even yours to begin with. Because Aries is the 7th house and Mercury there. So what does Mercury rule? It rules the 9th house, so his ideas are very much connected to the partner, teachings. And so when he says my struggle, he doesn't necessarily fighting his own battle, but there is a battle of a significant other that he's fighting. It's the mirror. And he is identified with it so much as this other is himself. Now, if you think about how hilarious it is in relations to the people that Hitler called to abolish who was constantly struggling, okay? The people that were marginalized in society, so disabled people, LGBTQ people, people from a different nationality, and of course, Jewish people, but absolutely not only. And so those people were living lives that was strugglesome. And then there was this identification with the struggle. It was their struggle, but he saw them as opponents. And so he said, it's my struggle, which is interesting. It's a weird form of relations. Okay, so this Uranus on the 6th, 7th axis, it's an unusual relational pattern. Okay, relational patterns are moon, but it's also the 6th, the 1st and 7th. The I and the other. So there's an unusual connection between the I and the other that denotes rebelliousness and projection to a very intense degree. And here, all without Pluto. Okay. Although Pluto is in Mercury's sign, so Pluto is involved. But this was even without Pluto. Now, remembering this picture, let's go back to Stalin. So, Stalin, first of all, has Aries and Libra in the 2nd and 8th. The moon, we already said, is in the 8th house in Libra, so it's a Libra-ruled moon. It's not a horrible position for sign for a moon to be, but the house is basically, the 8th house is the house where you are joining energies with another being. Okay, it's the house of ancestral wealth, but it's also the house of occult. Okay, and how do you reach this, gnosis or gnosis? By being permeable to other energies. Here, when you want to, let's say, learn about Aries, so you say, Aries, teach me your teaching, and then you kind of give yourself to be taught. And so having the moon, which is your sense of safety in a place where it's about gnosis, it can make it very challenging position for the moon to be at. Okay, because he's like, you only feel safe in those evolutionary, in the best cases, evolutionary perspectives, but this is not a naturally safe place to be. Okay, usually, in order to delve into those experiences, you need your own safe place, but here your own safe place is already enmeshed with this gnosis. And this is it denotes of emotional enmeshment rather than attachment. Also, not a very easy position of the moon. And then the closest planet that Hitler, first of all, Hitler brings his ascendant to this 8th house. It means that the gnosis that Stalin has around his life has to do with Hitler himself. Okay, Hitler is a form of is a vehicle, is a catalyzer of transformation in the life of Stalin. The Uranus means that the wealth of Stalin, that is the wealth of other nations coming into his nation because of the juncture he was at as a leader of a nation, is unusual, unexpected, and can have upheavals and rebellion. It basically means that Hitler brings revolution into his 8th house. While that can be reviving, it can also be traumatic. Okay, sudden, unexpected wealth, or windfall, but also the opposite of which. Here, sudden loss. That you just have to submerge into this chaos to, and basically it means that when Hitler came in, Hitler was emotionally enmeshing with chaos, which was something that he somewhat desired, but it was also overwhelming for him. And so in a way, if Hitler cut this relationship, because Hitler was empowered to cut this unhealthy relationship, anyway needed to be cut. It was not that Hitler overpowered him, it's that Hitler removed Stalin from his life, but it's kind of like this codependency, because Stalin was basically psychologically, emotionally enmeshed with Hitler, simply put. And so Hitler had to remove this thing, otherwise he would be insane. This is energy. Okay, it's not something that is spoken. Okay, this is not like we don't have records of them making love or whatnot. It's just energy between two people that happen to be nation leaders. Aries. So, Stalin brings Lilith in the 18 degrees of the 7th house of Hitler. And so Stalin brings a Lilith into Hitler's 7th house. And she is not all that far from the Mercury of Hitler. So Stalin receives a Mercury and a descendant of Hitler in the 2nd house. This can also mean that Stalin has certain ideas, certain skills that Hitler's thinking becomes his skill. Okay, so he can become enmeshed emotionally with Hitler, but also Hitler's own thinking process with Hitler is affected by his partners. From Hitler's perspective, Stalin is owning Hitler's mindset as a skill, so they can actually both gain from this on a peculiar mental level, because both can kind of integrate the ideas that for Hitler would be identified with something that actually belonged to Stalin. So for example, Hitler could rebel Stalin but actually feel betrayed by Stalin, which was not a wrong intuition, as Stalin's Uranus was in Hitler's 12th house. Okay, so it's non-dualism. It's not that Hitler would be paranoid for thinking that. It was actually being intuitive. And at the same time, Stalin could adopt, get to Hitler's ideas, or has somebody brings a Mercury, then they can bring a playful spirit, or you can begin to value yourself as a thinker or value thinkers. Mercury, or value applied, science, so they could have learned from each other and plagiarized each other, by the way. And let's look at the Sagittarius Gemini aspect. We mentioned Mercury. So for Stalin, midheaven, Sun and Venus in Sagittarius, which for him would be the 10th house, and the IC in Gemini. Well, Mercury is, where is Mercury? In his 11th with the lot of fortune. So Sagittarius and Gemini. Going back to Hitler. This is also how you do Synastry chart, okay? Even if you don't have the chart, or you have to file in, you have to be the secretary that files in, brings all these data together, so you don't have to do it, you can do it by heart. So the axis of Gemini. So for Hitler, Gemini is the 9th house and Sagittarius is the 3rd. Stalin brings his midheaven to the 3rd, the Sun and the Venus to the 3rd of house for Hitler. This means that Stalin's son, who Stalin is publicly is like a sibling. Hitler could feel like Stalin is his brother or his sister. And so the Jupiter for Hitler, to make it even worse, is in the 4th house. This literally means that when Stalin comes in, Hitler feels at home. And so he can replace certain things that happen at home, can project onto Stalin something that is home-like, and that he can see Stalin as a brother or sister to him. Okay, somebody that enters your 3rd house, it can be like close neighbor, close friend, a sibling, and sometimes you don't even know why. Okay, if you listen, let's say, I don't know, let's say you have Libra in your 3rd house, okay? You listen to Beyonce and think, oh my God, she's like a close sister to me, even though you never met her in her life, and you are white and she's black, and you live in so-and-so and she lives in so-and-so. It doesn't matter. She brings a stellium into your 3rd house. There's somebody, she's like somebody who's like a neighbor to you, somebody who's like, and even if you have an empty 3rd house, now Hitler has an empty 3rd house, okay? It doesn't mean that he didn't have siblings. It means that when somebody fills in an empty space for you, it can be both burdensome, but also it can be filling in some void that is left within you that they come and bring in. They come and bring themselves into that void. It's like, hey, I didn't have anything there, and now it's being triggered. Now, this also means that the relations between siblings are going to be accentuated by the merit of having Stalin in his life. So there can be a camaraderie, and there can be a tension, and that can stir up all of the upbringing thingies of that Hitler experienced. In the 9th house, although Stalin doesn't have anything there by the IC, so Hitler is bringing into Stalin's 4th house. Okay, what is Hitler bringing to Stalin's 4th house? So Stalin is bringing into Hitler's 4th house the sibling-esque relations by the merit of the ruler of Hitler's threat being in the 4th, and Stalin triggering the 3rd. Okay, so Stalin's bringing things to the 3rd house, but also to the, which is, by the way, skills, business, communication, applied stuff. Yes, so Hitler becomes very competent in applying his own ideas, literally, with this joining of the contract by Stalin. What Hitler brings is Pluto, is Lilith, and Neptune into Stalin's 4th house. Okay? Hitler brings this grand spirit of the time planner into 4th house of Stalin. Now, Stalin was the ruler of a nation, but also he was living in the nation that he was ruling. And so this means that Hitler brings the outer planets into the motherland of Russia or the USSR and Soviet Union, and that great, like Hitler literally brings great powers into Russia, and particularly to the home life of Stalin. So great, you know, we say conquering of land, which is what happened, but also um, uh, themes of civil unrest, themes of like a flood coming in, lack of boundaries, Neptune, lack of boundaries. And Lilith in the 19 degrees. So I don't know exactly what the Lilith theme is here. Okay, again, there was nothing unusual about women being hurt when there was war and then when there was peace. At the same time that it took 2 generations of men for women to get the right to vote, from all various reasons, it was not like women were having the time of their lives during these 2 generations. So, yeah, when I don't know, but I don't have anything smart to say, then I cannot say anything. So, and yeah. Next axis would be Cancer and Capricorn. So from Stalin's perspective, no, this is Hitler. From Hitler's perspective, he brings Chiron, Rahu, and the lot of fortune to Stalin's Cancer house, which would be the 5th, and to the 11th, the Moon, Jupiter, and Ketu. Now let's look at Stalin. So first of all, the 11th already has Mercury retrograde. And the 5th has nothing. Now we have this person, this Hitler person, that fills up your 5th. But what is he filling up your 5th with? With Jupiter, with Ketu, and a lot of fortune. So, sorry, with Jupiter, no, Jupiter and Ketu, this is in the 11th. Sorry. So, I'm sorry, Hitler brings to Stalin's 5th, he brings Ketu, or is it? Ketu Rahu. Ketu Rahu. Nou ja. Rahu and Chiron, and a lot of fortune. So, Rahu and Chiron. So, from Hitler's perspective, the answer is in the 10th, but whole sign speaking. From Stalin's perspective, Cancer is in the 5th, and he is receiving Rahu and Chiron. So suddenly, there's a chance to heal something and an eagerness to do so around relationships with children, around taking risks, around being more of a free spirit, but themes of care. Okay, because that's Cancer, nourishment, themes of care, and also food. Somebody's bringing an open wound into the place where you are supposed to have fun. As for the 11th, Stalin brings Mercury in the 11th degree of Capricorn, so that would be conjunct Hitler's Jupiter, and to a lesser degree conjunct Hitler's Moon. Now, of course, we already remember how Mercury plays out in Hitler's chart. Okay, look at this. Okay, so Stalin is the significant other. And where is Stalin's Mercury? In Hitler's home. So it's very intimate connection. Very intimate connection, but a connection that Hitler has to let go of, because this is Ketu. And so this being a colleague of Stalin, that for Hitler's experience is very intimate, but also for Stalin's experience, very intimate. Okay, these people trigger a lot within each other. They're leaders, but they're also people. Hitler needs to let go of this Mercury. It's a theme in Hitler's life. Whoever he partners up with, he needs to rebel, he needs to let go for the sake of his mental and to some degree also physical health. As for Stalin, this guy bringing Ketu into his 11th house. This guy's draining his energy. He's also draining this guy's energy, but he's draining his energy. He also brings the moon there. So he brings your emotions into light publicly. Okay. He can also bring you, unfortunately, in this case, in this context, he can bring you a sense of safety with someone that you need to let go of. Stalin can feel emotionally safe, or Hitler can also feel emotionally at home being the colleague of Stalin. Okay, so Hitler here did actually, funnily enough, a job of growth when he severed these ties, because this was a person, this was his ghetto. He was leaning into Stalin. It was, and that tells me that when Hitler operated by signing a treaty with Stalin, at least emotionally, there was an aspect of Hitler that was wanting to lean back into. And look, Jupiter here is the ascendant of Stalin. Okay, it's the ruler of the ascendant of Stalin. So this Jupiter in Hitler's life, in this case, was also Stalin. That is the ruler of both his sixth house, health, not fifth, I confused back then, and his third house. So it's not, when we say it's like romantic partner, but not, it doesn't mean that they were gay. It's just that Stalin brought certain sort of joy within the restricted place that Hitler was. There was a bit of joy or a bit of expansion that Stalin managed to bring, and Hitler was tending to lean back to it. He was, like it seems, it was actually tending to go into his emotional safety with his keto. And even though this person was draining on his energy, he was providing a sense of safety and a sense of optimism. Although intuitively from the 12th house, Hitler had to, he would be insane with the Stalin in his 12th. And as a job of growth, he basically violated this treaty. Like, no, I cannot have this person as a colleague. I cannot have this person so affecting my life. And this person was also being codependent, okay, draining the energy of Hitler. So they were codependent on each other pretty much. And so Hitler did this. No, I'm not accepting this. I'm not accepting this person affecting my life. I have to rebel against this person on a political level. It was also the strike of rebellion against Russia that started the Second World War. Okay. Of course, there can be much said, like to the end of times with this, but I'm going to pause at this point and allow all of us, including me, to kind of process what was going on here. Because this is very much looking at things from a bird's eye view. Okay, it's honoring for the spirit of the times, from the spirit of the world, for the spirit of development, and seeing how the intimate relations, and I don't mean sexual, but the intimacy between two people becomes the face of the earth, literally. Literally. Hitler started World War II as an act of rebellion in Stalin. which denotes in the seventh first axis, he has to rebel his partners. Whoever would be a partner that he would be very closely identifying with, he would have to rebel this partner. I don't like, if you ask me how to remedy this aspect, I don't know. And from Stalin's perspective, by the merit of being him, he got Hitler, he could see Hitler where he didn't see himself. Well, Hitler himself had nothing in the 12th house of Stalin, by the way. Okay. Hitler brought nothing to the 12th house of Stalin. So, yes, Stalin was codependent on Hitler, but it was Hitler that needed to stop this. So, on what we see is Hitler betrayed Stalin. But what was actually going on is that Stalin posed the risk of being hidden enemy to Hitler. And Hitler was just being intuitive. Both were doing horrors for the world, okay? So there's no question about it. Who is worse, who is this, who is that? Like, that's not even the question. But the thing is, it looked like, on a mundane level, oh, Hitler betrayed Stalin. But on an energy level, Hitler was just being intuitive. Because Hitler brought nothing to the 12th house of Stalin. He brought things to the 8th house of Stalin. Okay? He brought rebellion and upheaval to the 8th house of Stalin. Stalin brought rebellion and upheaval to the 12th house of Hitler. Both are very potent houses. Okay? And both can denote betrayal. Okay. But if Hitler wouldn't do this, then it would be done upon him. And he would have no power over this. So he took his power. And this was very fated, because in this situation, Stalin's 8th house is Hitler's first, and so Hitler could take action here, while Stalin could not. And this unhealthy relation between two men was the story of the breaking of the world apart. At the time, it was the spirit of the time. It was a conflict that spiked. You know, if you think about the assassination of Ferdinand of the First World War, where there were so many treaties, so many countries were involved in this tiny country, somebody assassinated this leader in this tiny country that nobody would have cared about otherwise, but because everybody was so enmeshed with so many treaties, then there was a world war. Now we actually had two giants that were making a pact, and it was fated for this pact to be dissolved. And we can see it how both the person, okay, the leader versus the leader, how they were both enmeshed, and one of them had to do the move, and it was only Hitler that could do the move. Both of them were posing threats to each other, okay? But while Stalin perhaps could feel safe because he was seeing Hitler from the place Hitler didn't see himself, Hitler was seeing things that Stalin swept away under the rug, and for the last strike of power that he could do to save his own life, he had to strike against Stalin, which was a world war. I don't know what is like the lesson from this, and the lesson from this, we need to have healthy relationships, we need to remediate our relationships, both on a personal and an international level. Like we need to do good magic, I don't know. But that was the spirit of the time, and I began this episode with this disclaimer. It's an episode dedicated to the spirit of the times, to the spirits of the world, and of course to the spirit of development. Because that's a point of view, and that's an observation. And you see, you know, there were horrors that were happening in that war, in these wars. So there's the horrors of the Holocaust, the horrors of the ideologies, the horrors of both communism and socialism, and later we would see capitalism. Like nobody is devoid of horrors. But what this offers is this interaction between people that is also interaction between nations, and how fragile the political arena actually is, which is also a takeaway. We think that our leaders are omnipotent. They are people. And when we give them power of omnipotence, then if they are having an unhealthy relationship, all the children suffer, if we're like the position of the children. But when we take a bit more of our power, we see that our leaders are not omnipotent, and they are people liable to many things, many goods and many evils. And it is both not giving the leaders all that much power in the situation of leaders versus the people. And it is understanding that for the spirit of the times, if Hitler and Stalin did not betray each other, then the people would be subdued. This is not an in praise of war, definitely not an in praise of world wars, okay? But it's definitely something to acknowledge as we invite solutions that are more adapted to having good life here, sustainable good life. So this was this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. This is where the personal meets the personal is the political Tyrans version.